transfer a lot of that into our human perceptions of music and naturally through music composition as well. So, here's some of my motivations that really inspired me when I was getting. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is actually, everyone's seen the traditional music score, whereas these are not traditional music scores. These are written by experimental composers in the last 2 centuries. And they're just all kinds of crazy things. And I think modern composers such as John Cage and Penderecki were really struggling against that physical limitation of musicians. Like, how do you play that? Well, you kind of have to rely on the musician to interpret this, and it might be completely different. And there's a place for that. There's a world for that. But a lot of this stuff looks like what I do in effects software. A lot of these systems are so complex and so procedural that they really are a visual program, and they had to become visual just to handle that level of complexity. Here's one by John Cage. That's very famous musical composition. Penderecki here. Let's see. Yep. So these are all weird, and I won't pretend to understand them. I'm not a modern music theorist or a musical musician, but I do understand how to program effects and as well as synthesize MIDI and audio and sound and things like that. So I'll just briefly demonstrate. Now I'll try to keep this as software independent as I can. I'll be using Houdini, but I know that most of the audience probably doesn't know Houdini, so I will talk in generic terms such as geometry, and hopefully we're all familiar with some of the concepts there. So here I'll just open up an unrelated scene. This is the scene I was working with the students here all week, and there's this really interesting phenomenon that's happening in advanced effects software, and that is using geometry as a visual programming language. Okay, so in this case, these lines are being used to program how tightly these objects are constrained together. So they're responsible, these imaginary visual lines that were created in geometry, created in a procedural program, they have nothing to do with the visual result. And we just assume because it's in a visual program and we're doing visual work that the visual result is just a given, but we really have to think, well, does it have to be just a visual result? So those are responsible for the immense complexity of breaking this building. And there's obviously a giant procedural system at play here to set that up. Music software doesn't come close to that. And I can say this because I've worked for 15 or 20 years with music software. There's no comparison. The visual industry has had to evolve, whereas and it's had to develop these mimes with visual programming. So here, all of these lines have a name of the chunk on them, and they have a strength on them. And this is really, we have the ability with this visual program to blur the interface, to blur the program, to transition to a very fast, very flexible environment to make very complex systems with, and eventually that abstraction is necessary. So then we have to ask ourselves, okay, now this is the meat of my presentation here. What is musical notation? So, and there's been a lot of work done with MIDI, of course. And also, I'll just give a forewarning if the sound ever drops out. I will promptly restart or do whatever I can to fix it, and I think it might have just done that. No. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let me briefly restart the software here. Okay. Okay. That's not good. Okay, while this is, well, let me just test it once. While it might be restarting, I'll just explain how to use a point cloud for music. Oh, no, that's mine. Okay, I'm restarting. Okay. Yeah. All right, so a note. Now, there's if anyone's ever worked with MIDI or sound, a lot of this stuff is represented as a stream of data. So it might go as like a data channel that's being like passed through computers and all that sort of thing, and it's really, really hard to work with. It's hard for music programs to work with it. It's hard for anything, of course, visual to work with it. And I was trying to work with it in a very low-level way for many years. And what I ended up realizing, and especially seeing that kind of visual programming present, is that a musical note is a lot like a particle. So defining musical notes as particles is a lot better, and simply using the off-the-shelf software for an I/O is probably the better way to go. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how I constructed musical notation out of a point cloud. Let me see here. All right, that's encouraging. There we go. Hallelujah. Okay, so this is a 3D program, one of the oldest ones actually, Houdini. And anyone has anything to do with games or 3D graphics should hopefully understand the concept of a piece of point in space, a geometric point in space. This is a simple point cloud. So it's just 3 points in space. And it's completely unrelated to music. However, just like we can assign normals and textures and all that sort of thing to geometry, we can also assign completely arbitrary data, such as what note it is or how long it is. So that was really one of my first breakthroughs last year, was to really get this really complex musical data represented as simple point clouds, which modern software can fly through those. We can do 10 million points, no problem. 10 million points in even a music program, I think, would not be too nice. So here, what I've done is, well, I'll just make one from scratch here. I'm just going to make a single point in space. Okay, there it is, right at the origin there. It's not really doing anything right now. Then I'm going to raise it into the air. So let's say we want a middle C, like note 60 right there. So I've represented how the pitch by how high the note is on the y-axis, on the up and down axis. From there, and I'll just move it over a little bit, where it is here is time. So on the x-axis, that would represent time. From there, I'm going to give it a length. Okay, or duration. So that I can represent as the normal. So here I'll just make it 2 seconds. There we are. Okay, here we go. That's almost enough to make a musical note. And now we just have to say how loud it is. So here, I'm just going to make a particle scale. This would actually be how big the particle would render as if we were to render it. But in this case, I'll just make it 50% volume. 0.5. There we go. Okay, I do have a tool to convert all this data to custom assets that a custom system. I've abstracted it just a little bit, but the ability to work with this in a 3D program has a lot of advantages. Let's see. Set from, it's one of these two. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so here I'm just converting that data into slightly more abstract things, such as a piece of data called duration, a piece of data called note, a piece of data called time. Okay, and then we should be able to plug it in. Oh, yay, it worked. Okay, plug it in to this. Okay, well, actually, this. So, this, by most even people that know Houdini, would be considered a bit crazy. So, what this is a geometric representation of the actual data that it will produce, that it will send to the sound card. So it actually just goes down and then up and then down, and we can see this is the actual data that will be played into my music synthesizer here, which is Reason, but it really could be played into any music synthesizer. I just am using this for the piano. Okay, and let's play it. So I'll just go back to this here. There we go. And yeah, if we wanted to raise it up in the air, there we go. Okay, if we wanted to make it louder or softer, we have that level of control. Now, in itself, this is a lot more inefficient than a music program, but I'll get into the efficiencies of it in just a second. Okay, so here's 3. I've made a tool just for doing that process we did there. So here, notice that I have and I'll just show these as a little bit bigger so we can see them here. There we are. It should be better to look at. That. Okay, so here I've just got 3 individual notes merged together. Let me get my play bar back. And I'm just moving a line across the screen in order to visualize what time we're at. So that's just a piece of geometry as well. But we basically made our own MIDI synthesizer or sequencer in a graphics program. Okay, so that's just 3 of those systems merged together there. Okay, so 3 simple notes. That's my simple note tool. Okay, that's a good place to start. And then the next place that we could start is by writing it out as a file to a sound program. So here, and these are native tools in Houdini, believe it or not, we have a MIDI output driver. As there's other drivers like sound drivers and virtual microphones and things that not many people know about. But here, I'm just going to write this to a MIDI file. There we go. So it should write that out as these 3 notes into the MIDI file. And then I'm just going to go and read it back in. So that was the next crucial key, was being able to write and read MIDI data to and from in a seamless way, in a reproducible way. So there's my demo MIDI file that just got written. See, it's 10:23 a.m. Okay. And a lot of these tools I have not optimized. Some of them are slow. But that's I think the great thing about a very open development environment is you can get it to work first and then program it. Okay, so let's plug that guy in, and it's the same. Okay, so we've got a musical notation point cloud that has really, really simple attributes. We've got the ability to read in and write out seamlessly. So that's really was the first step that I undertook last year. Since then, I've been doing actually a lot of music with it, and a lot of experiments with it, and so I'll share some of the workflows with you guys. Okay, so here I'm making a point and making 3 notes, setting the notes to the vertical axis, or the vertical assignment there, and making a line out of them. Lines are awesome. Lines are great to work with because they're so easy way to encapsulate data, and once again, they just fly through processors and all kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to give it an attribute which spreads across that, and then I'm going to procedurally manipulate the timing of this line. This would be like a quadruplet, or it could be a triplet as far as music is concerned. Okay. Then I'm just going to, let's see, what am I doing here? Here, I'm assigning the particle scale or the velocity to it. So this can be done with extremely procedural tools, setting minimums and maximums, ramps, lookups. This is purely procedural, as opposed to what I used to do in music programs, which is like move a note around by hand and then test it. Oh, it doesn't. And this could operate on 4 notes. It could operate on 400 notes. It would be the same result. Okay, same relative volumes. And then one of the coolest things in proceduralism is, of course, copying things. So I've just used a simple copy node and duplicated it. Let's see if I can get sound out of this guy right here. Or the duration's probably necessary. There we go. Okay, kind of repetitive, but we can make as many of them as we want, and we can change any aspect of the volumes and whatnot as we want. Okay, but that's boring. So now I found one necessary piece that I'll just briefly demonstrate is pattern recognition. So that's, in this stage, it's just as simple as recognizing a pattern of notes here. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, these notes. Or could recognize a different pattern of notes, add an extra 57 on there, and then we get a slightly different pattern. And that can be used for doing logic and making certain things louder and softer, and patterns, basically. So these would be our current repetition. And let's see. Okay. So here we just see the difference in the velocities there. Okay. Then we need a little bit of interest in the timing. So once again, this would require everything being stretched by hand. Don't want to go there. In this case, we can do that pretty easily with lookup table, point cloud. Here we can see that I've got a few what I call hit points. This is a tool, and we can just move, time stretch, time warp these notes. The great thing about working in something like MIDI in a point cloud is that we're never going to lose quality this way. It's just giving more or less space in between the notes and adapting the durations there. So let me get. Should be slowing down. Okay, and then let's add some interest to the velocity. There we go. Okay, so also I was always frustrated with musical programs in terms of how maybe they had rudimentary features for randomization, but anyone that does effects or studies natural phenomena knows that there is no such thing as random. So when you put a random filter on a group of notes, yeah, you might vary the inflection a little bit, but eventually it's all just junk. Whereas to do high-end effects in a fluid sim or a particle hit, these are very controlled things. They operate much more on noise. So here we can see that I'm doing some procedural volume adjustment across the entire spectrum, and I'm just adding some noise variation. It's not going to just be completely random. It's going to actually flow more or less like a piano player would have natural inflections in their hands and in their playing styles. So it should get quieter here. Okay. All right. So Once again, we can probably do this even though it might be starting to get a little bit cumbersome with a music program. What can we do that only a 3D or only a visual program can do? And I think it'd be something like that. Okay, and at that point, we're going to start to resemble those modern musical scores where certain amounts of randomization and inflection are built into the musical score. So here I'm doing a noise pattern, and we can make this higher frequency, lower frequency. Let's just see what that sounds like. And if we wanted a different variant, it'd be instant. Okay, so there we go, that updated. So, possibilities. Now we're still on 2 grids right now. I'm going to branch out into 3-dimensional space pretty soon. But that's the basic idea behind the flexibility of using abstract data such as a point cloud for a musical score. So, I've simplified that whole process. And this is just an open development. This is make it, test it, see if it works. So this is true in all the disciplines we're studying today probably, and then once you get some promising results, then compact it, optimize it. So I've done a little bit of that. I'll just show you a different paradigm here. Here I'm starting with 1 note. I'm using this note in a tool to repeat notes along this note. So if we make the note longer or shorter, we're just using procedural ways to do that. And they're being distributed along a curve. So we have more density here and less density here. I'm just getting rid of that annoying last point, which is kind of a bug. Then I'm copying some more notes onto that. In this case, I'm copying 3 notes and a melody onto it. And now we have a really, really procedural way to adjust that. There we go. Okay. Then I'm doing a different variant. That's a major chord. This is a minor chord, and I'm just doing a blend based on another curve between a major and a minor chord, and applying the same velocity adjustment. In this case, I'm applying that noise pattern we talked about earlier to give it some natural variation. And let's plug that in and see what happens. So compacting that into a few different notes instead of just 20 or 30. And if we wanted a different variation there, let's see what we can do. I'm applying some noise in that blend. We can see that in the yellow and blue here. So maybe we want it to instantly adjust to somewhere else in the score. So now we've got, or maybe on the end. Okay. Okay, so that little adjustment took me less than a second to do, but in a music program that would have been a lot of work, actually. So it's going to start to, even though it's a longer initial setup, it's going to start to save time and open musical possibilities as opposed to restrict them due to the lack of playability. Okay. And then the last, and in my own musical endeavors, I've had to really try to make a natural, I have to make it sound good. If it doesn't sound good, who cares about it, right? So here's a different experiment. Here's once again a note, simple note, copying notes onto that, assigning a melody. Now in this case, I've assigned just chords, so they're a set of 3 chords. There we go. Really boring. Oh. No one ever plays the piano like that. Okay, so here they're probably going to hit the lower notes. Using basic musical theory without a player, we have to inherit those things. So they're probably going to hit the lower notes a bit harder than the higher notes, otherwise you're going to have screechy high notes. So here I've done a lookup along the height. And this is a 3D thing. The height is a 3D thing. It's using the score itself as a geometric entity. So this will sound a little better. Oh, I'm not sounding it actually. Just a second. There we go. Sounds a little better. Okay. And then here's this. So what I found was when you hit the piano, uh, even though the hand is going to go on the similar emphasis, the you might have a little bit of timing variation, but the emphasis is still going to be on the beat. Similar to when a crowd claps, they're all going to clap. The emphasis will be on when they group clap, but all the little claps are going to be kind of scattered around. So here, I've got a noise pattern to very minute differences in timing. And it's not a random, it's a noise pattern which sounds much more organic. The red represents a shift forward, the blue represents a shift backwards in time. And then the farther it is away from its emphasis point, it will decrease in volume. So this is the emphasis point, the middle, and the red shift, it'll decrease in volume. The blue shift, it'll decrease in volume. So the emphasis will still be loudest at the hit point, but we'll get a much more natural progression of values. That sounds actually like someone's hitting the piano. Okay, and then the low notes, they'll actually hold more to the timing, and the upper notes, they won't. So then I've gone through and mixed vertically the same thing we just did between the two time-based ones. I've mixed vertically, so these are going to adhere to timing better. These will kind of float around a bit, and then I've given it once again some of our velocity variation. Here we go. So that's a brief tour through some of the technology. All right. So now let's get creative. Here's an experiment. Why stop there when we can do all the fun things that the visual effects industry has spent 15 years developing all this technology? Why not just plug that in for free into this area? I mean, really, there's never going to be a music program that has dynamics in it. There just won't. But, I mean, why would they spend all that time doing it when no one really needs that or cares about it? But if you can just say, okay, I've got 15 years of top-end movie development and game development that I can just plug into this, then you can do whatever you might imagine. So in this case, these represent a musical octave, and this, as it swings back and forth, would represent when it hits that musical note. Okay. And I really love finding similarities in exactly, like in terms of real-world dynamics and physics, to what a music composition might be like. The low would always have the emphasis in this musical chord, so this is mimicking it, and it's giving a bit of noise variation in the actual notes it hits. This is going to be louder, these are going to be softer. Okay, I'll just give a brief look at how that's possible. So really, we just imagine this thing traveling along in time, and that would be our musical score. And I'll show that being done here. And it's not going to get real time here, but you should see the notes being placed along the staff. Almost, wait for it. There it goes. So it's just going along and writing those notes onto our musical staff. I'll let you see. Even though this is slow, I was going to briefly show this right here. There it goes. So here it's creating those MIDI events as we go along. There it goes. You wait for one more note to appear, and then I'll switch to the next example. goes. Okay. And all this can be baked out, of course, is just what I'm doing and achieving the real-time playback. Okay, that's that. Let's get a bit more creative. Whoa, that didn't sound good. Might have to restart again. Let's see. Cool. Okay, this is a fuzzy logic simulation. Once again, music programs can't do particle logic and fuzzy logic and crowd sims. But in this case, what I've got is a camera. These circles are really scared of this camera. So when the camera approaches them, they run away from the camera. And they're of different sizes. So each one of these wheels represents a musical octave. It's just, once again, it's a line, and it's got 12 divisions. It's a 12-sided polygon, meaning 12 notes of the octave. So as they run away, they roll on the ground, and when their note hits the ground, it makes the note. The bigger wheels represent the lower octaves. The higher wheels represent the higher octave, because musical composition, they play the high notes really fast and light. They play the low notes really deep and slow. The smaller ones don't have as much velocity. The bigger ones have more velocity. And as they run away from the camera, they're scared, so they produce minor chords. Then, when the camera's not looking at them anymore, they want to figure out what this camera's up to, so they approach the camera again, but this time with major chords. And then, in terms of panning, we're using the camera as the panning mechanism. So I've got 10 MIDI channels in this, and it'll just decide whether it's on the right spectrum or the left spectrum based on the camera frustum. So here they're running away. These should be minor. Okay, I'll just briefly show the setup here. There we go. And how this is being achieved. Okay. So, I've just got particles. And as you can see, they run away to and from the camera. I'm just raising them up and copying a wheel on them. So once again, the bigger ones are lower octaves, the smaller ones are higher octaves. And then I'm going through and simply baking that out, as we saw, into a point cloud. From here, this is, as far as converting this visual phenomenon into a musical score, this is all we need. Let me see. So here I'm assigning the velocities. If they're moving really fast, if they're a big wheel, they're going to hit with a high velocity, and vice versa. The red ones would be bigger velocities. Let me try to visualize that for you guys. There we go. So we can see that it's very organic. Okay. Okay, this is the, actually, what is that? That's the pan, perhaps? That could be the pan. No, that's the pan. And here's the notes that they're going to hit, represented as a rainbow. Okay. So, yeah. So it's going to run away from the camera. And from there, that's all being set. Oops. That's all being set to a musical score. That's all procedural, thousands of, let's see, how many is it? 7,000 notes. If we wanted a different composition, we would just do a different camera animation. And then they would be converted to each of their MIDI channels and then piped through the data output to the MIDI. Okay, so I did that a few months ago, and this is one I just got done with last weekend. Let me see. Fluid simulation, here we go. Okay, so I'm really curious about the relationships between fluid harmonics and musical harmonics. So an ocean is a very similar because it has low frequencies and deep, unmoving melodies on the base of its current, and then on the top you have these little choppy waves and all that kind of thing. So I'm using this little spider web thing, and these are simulation objects, and this is actually suspended in a fluid. So even though I can't get real time out of this fluid, this is a very expensive fluid sim, time-wise. This is a full-fledged, all the dev that this company's put into fluid sim. From there, I'm just suspending different weighted rigid body objects, these little balls. And these ones are weighted more, these ones are weighted less, so these will float, these won't. And they're all connected together by constraints. So obviously, once again, music programs can't really do this stuff. And then, let me see, I made a little visualization here, I think. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I'm using the impulse. So as something vibrates or moves or whatever, really jerky-like in the current, it'll produce a note. It's using the impulse, and the low ones are expected to impulse less. The high, choppy ones, lighter ones would be expected to impulse more. I'm just figuring out the impulse there in relative terms. So you can see the notes being created behind it. These are these yellow things. Here's the actual. I actually did a simulation to make the. Let me turn some of these things off so you can see it better. Let's see. These little lines. Let's see. I want those. These little dots, actually not those dots. Here's the dots, I think. As the impulse happens, these dots will flow along the lines here, and these are triplets. So here's the bass note, and then it varies off and flows based on the opposite of its impulse direction until they hit the edges and they stop. So they generate triplets there. That simply just gets baked in time. Here's the notes baked in time. There we go. And here I've got a grid. So this would represent pan, and this would represent pitch. How hard they got hit would represent velocity, and their triplet would be the duration. So it's just like carrying each note to the next one it hits. So here I'm doing that. And we have these notes forming there, setting the velocities. You can see the red ones are more powerful, they're lower. And now I'm setting that to the musical score, which looks a lot like some of those experimental musical scores we saw earlier. Mixing the duration, converting that to the data, and that's it. So I'll just watch that one more time, and then I'll conclude the presentation. Okay, and obviously no one's going to be listening to this. These are fairly abstract, so I just want to close the talk with a few seconds of the personal work I've done. I've been able to use Houdini, the visual program I'm using, to achieve a complexity that I simply couldn't by hand. I'm not a very good musician anyway. But here's a short snippet of some actual creative work. So a lot of notes. It was around 500 notes every 10 seconds. And to make that all flow together naturally and accelerate and decelerate that particular style that I'm pursuing, this almost visual composition style, that's an example. So that's it. Any questions? Oh. Thank you. Probably about 2 or 3 minutes for questions. Anyone have any? Yes?
At the moment you're using a very chaotic blocky impulse for these. Do you get a more harmonic response if you use smoother shapes or more progressive notes?
Okay.
Does that affect the aesthetic of the final result?
So in what way? I'm trying to picture your question actually. So
Okay, so for that kind of like you had a spiraling set
yes.
of
Okay.
cubes or rectangles.
Yep.
If you had a more kind of slime generated shape, how does that impact on the aesthetic?
Good question. I just finished that last weekend, so I need to once again, these things are like, okay, we get the concept working, the concept works, and I'm looking forward to the next 6 months where I can actually really dive into some fluid sims and try different combinations. And the great thing about proceduralism is, okay, that was like maybe an octave of 20, musical combination of 20 notes along a certain shape. What do other shapes do? What does more depth do? What does turbulent water do? Maybe I could use a smoke simulation instead of a fluid sim. How does that affect it? So yeah, I don't know actually. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yes, for me it's a back and forth process. So I still rely on Nuendo specifically, but yeah, music programs in order to, okay, I really just want to make a little adjustment to this note. Okay, let's go and import it, make some little tweaks, then move it back, do a time warp in Houdini, then go back and forth and back and forth. So it's, for me at least, it's a very back and forth process, a very slow process, but I'm able to achieve a complexity that way that I couldn't otherwise. Yes, I mean this is just a MIDI file, so any MIDI song could be imported into Houdini in this way. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It struck me that you mostly used the piano sound.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you could also use it to modify the synthesize the sound.
That's my end goal. Yes, but I think that's about 10 years off. So the reason I'm choosing the piano as my test mechanism is because it's so familiar. It's unforgiving. It's harsh. If there's no, it's just a note, and whatever that note is, it has to be very intentional. So if anything isn't working, it can't just be forgiven like a synth pad or a violin or a sitar sound. It wouldn't just blend nicely together. It's like, oh, that note sounds really horrible. And so it's a very good, everyone's familiar with the piano. The piano is the very definition of MIDI itself, the MIDI format. So that's what I'm choosing to test on, is the piano. Yeah. Yes?
It really wasn't okay. Great presentation.
Thank you.
You mentioned 10 years for the stuff that you're thinking of. What's the kind of long-term goals or vision that you have for this project? I mean, as in a minute,
yeah.
But
Maybe. I did release a book on this subject matter about 7 years ago, but it didn't involve this technology. It didn't involve point clouds and notation. But I'm personally, I'm an artist, and this is a hobby. I do effects professionally, but this is an area that I hope to keep developing over the next 20 years. Yeah. So. Okay, thank you, everybody.